Well, thank you for that, though. In the newsroom, Rebecca Bowering there with all of the news. He stayed. He's cautious, some even say predictable. In other words, everything that Nicolas Sarkozy is not. Meet François Hollande, the frontrunner in France's presidential election campaign. And when we say frontrunner, we mean it. The socialist candidate opening up a 20-point lead in the polls over the outgoing president with less than 3 months to go until Election Day. Yet even though he's a mainstay of French politics, he was chair of his party for a decade, Hollande has never been a government minister, has run for national office. In fact, he remains something of an unknown quantity, running against the incumbent from a party that's been he's running Hollande from a party that's been known in the past to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. In fact, the socialists haven't won a presidential election in France since 1988. Today in the France 24 debate, who is François Hollande? And to help us with this question, Thomas Cheventier of the Socialist Party's Youth Wing. Thanks for being with us. He's the author of Mona Lisa's Pajamas. Reporter Craig Capidis, welcome, sir. Mathieu Doiret of the polling institute Ipsos, thank you for being with us. And John Gaffney, who teaches at Aston University, the author of Political Leadership in France, from Charles de Gaulle to Nicolas Sarkozy. Thank you for joining us from Brittany in Western France.
That's right.
Now, you can also weigh in on the conversation and tell us what you think of François Hollande on the France 24 debate Facebook page and on Twitter, where our handle is @FrançoisF24. Yes, as we said at the outset, he's in the driver's seat, but 8 months ago it wasn't even sure that François Hollande would make a run. Now, all of that changed back in May when the socialists' favorite at the time, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, came out of a Harlem police station in handcuffs. Thomas Cheventier, it's an incredible twist of fate, isn't it?
Well, actually, the French presidential election is the meeting between the French people and a guy and a man. And the history of this electoral campaign is the history of some guy, François Hollande, that said, I want to be the president.
All right, but
I think I can change. And 8 months ago,
8 months ago there were several candidates, but all eyes were on Strauss-Kahn squarely.
Yeah, but I mean, Strauss-Kahn wasn't a candidate at that time. He was still.
But he since said that he was preparing to make a run, and everybody was.
Nobody knows. And in fact, François Hollande was already going up on the polls at that time. And we mustn't say that François Hollande is here because Dominique Strauss-Kahn had this kind of problem. We must see a long time ago, because at that time, François Hollande was already going higher and higher on polls.
Mathieu Doiret, your reaction to that? Do you agree?
Yeah, I would say that François Hollande has always been someone that was seen as competent and a good leader, and at least by the microcosm of the political analysts, the journalists. But in the public opinion, I think he did not really exist before the socialist primary of this year. He was someone that people were a little bit familiar with just because he was one of the major spokesmen of the Socialist Party. But in fact, François Hollande just appeared last year and turned out to be someone that was a very good substitute for, obviously, Dominique Strauss-Kahn at first, and then proved that he was a little bit more than that.
But let's pick up on that just for our viewers who don't follow the nitty-gritty of French politics. Craig Capidis, both of our guests here making the salient point that François Hollande's campaign really gaining momentum with the primaries. The French never before had an open primary system. You as an American know full well what that's about.
As you just said, he's a substitute for the real thing. It's very clear that Dominique Strauss-Kahn was running for the presidency of France. His whole structure of his life up to that point, what he had said was going in that direction, whether he had officially announced or not. When he dropped out, the only one left was the substitute, François Hollande, who is a statue for a French Socialist Party apparatchik. He has no leadership background. He's
party chair for a decade.
Hey, I've chaired parties. That doesn't make me, and I'm sure you've chaired parties and groups
Not
too.
the same kind.
But he had no leadership role in execution. Look, there is a crossroads going on in the world right now. Every country in the West is in chaos, starting with the United States. France, with all of its problems, has done a pretty darn good job maintaining an equal balance here. And it's really important to point out that the socialism that exists in France has always been a blend of conservative philosophy and socialist philosophy. De Gaulle, a lot of the so-called right-wingers here contributed to that socialist thought. I do not believe that François Hollande is a leader. He hasn't been forged in steel. Whether that's going to have any effect on the electorate or not remains to be seen. But his policies, this 60-point policy, is full of holes.
Well, about the substitute, we said already this about Martine Aubry, and of course
the party chair.
Yeah, and of course it was obvious that we were going to say it about François Hollande. But I mean, this is science fiction. Dominique Strauss-Kahn didn't run for the primary, and now we have a candidate that has been legitimated by these primary elections, and that is revealed by this electoral campaign. We have seen him on Sunday with this big meeting and his big speech that he has. That he can be.
The campaign certainly has momentum now. Let's bring John Gaffney in now. John, do you think that when you see François Hollande, do you think substitute or do you think he's his own man?
Well, I mean, people have greatness thrust upon them, like Clement Attlee and many other leaders. I mean, I think in a sense the debate between Thomas, Craig and Matthew, I mean, everybody's saying partial things that are interesting and true. But what is interesting is that you've got this very kind of polar view of who this guy is. To a certain extent, he is an accidental candidate. In a certain way, he wasn't really known. He came known to the French through the primaries, which surprisingly, I mean, people were afraid that the primaries were going to sink like a lead balloon, but in fact, the French actually enjoyed them. And Hollande became a national figure from then. But what's very interesting in what is being said about him is that although one might have views about the 60-point plan and so on, what is really interesting and crucial, as the speakers are all saying, is this is about image. This is about François Hollande's image. Is he experienced? Does he have the presidential weight and so on? And what is interesting about this context is that these questions dominate all the time. They dominate the presidential debate. I mean, what is particularly interesting is how much of these presidential debates, like in the United States, are about what the Americans call, in particularly, character. They are about the characters of these people. And the question is that François Hollande is actually doing, I mean, phenomenally well. And I'm sure that Thomas is obviously very pleased, but he's probably quite surprised too that the party seems to be, and their candidate seems to be doing so well. I mean, a 20-point lead is unheard of. So another thing to say about Hollande, he wants to be a normal president, is that this election is about Sarkozy in particular. It's about who will stand against him, but it's particularly about, I think it was Mathieu who said that in a sense, or no, it was you who said that in a sense Hollande is everything that Sarkozy isn't, or that's what he's presenting himself as being. This is a context about an absolutely dramatic loss of confidence in the sitting president, and therefore the camera is now turning to what appears to be his successor.
And last Sunday, François Hollande making his first major campaign speech. This Thursday, he detailed a list of 60 commitments to the French people, everything from safeguarding the separation of church and state to bringing the retirement age that was recently raised back to 60 years of age. and measures to spur a growth-led recovery. Sorry, get that right. Mathieu Douaré, the polls all indicate that the French like what they hear, but do they believe what he says?
I think that the voters, they don't really need to believe. They need to compare, just to compare. And they are quite satisfied with what they see when they compare, because they compare both to what the socialists previously did in the 2007 campaign in particular. They were divided, they were erratic, even I would say lunatic, because the candidate was not under control, that's obvious, and people felt it particularly strongly after the beginning of the last 4 months, which are absolutely crucial, and we are entering this absolutely crucial period
in home stretch.
The home stretch in a very, very, very different situation for the Socialist Party. It remains a critical period for every candidate, even the front runner. But everyone sees that the situation is reversed in a way. On the other hand, the rejection of Nicolas Sarkozy is now probably beginning to give way to something a bit different, which is called an appetite for change, an appetite for the alternance, as we say in France.
So you think that François Hollande's platform will come under more scrutiny in the weeks to come?
I'm not sure the platform is the essential part of what is going on. I think the appetite for change is much more a question of credibility and of considering, I would say, what you will gain and what you will lose with a change.
Thomas Chevandier, I want to rebound in that light on what John Gaffney said, and just between you and me, nobody's listening here.
Nobody.
Come on, you must be surprised. A 20-point lead.
Well, yeah, it's a big gap, and we hope it will stay that way. But we are not so much self-confident, because you were talking about 2007, but in 2002 we were self-confident, and it finished on the 21st April, and we don't want to do this again. So we take every step one another. And this time, on Sunday, it was the time to show that this guy can be president, and French people are convinced that he can be president and that he will lead the country. And now, today, we had to show that we can change the country, that he can restore justice.
Coming out with detailed
he
proposals.
Can restore equality. That was the stake of today.
And we talked a little earlier about François Hollande being both a household name. John Gaffney mentioning, and so are you, that this is all about image. Hollande, something of an unknown quantity, and you're going to see why with this split screen. There's this before and after pictures. Hollande's certainly been training for a run for president. Gone, as you can see on the right, are the pudgy cheeks. Hollande really with a new look. Craig Capitis, do you like the old Hollande?
He's obviously visited Karl Lagerfeld. Look, what we're talking about here is the difference between...
He's hit the salad bars. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. But what we're talking here is essentially the difference between butter and margarine. Look...
But image does matter. We mentioned...
The image is very important, and we all know that. But let's look at some of the hard realities here. As a citizen of the European Union, I'd love to retire at 60. Hey, great. You know what? France can't afford it, neither can the European Union. This 60-point thing, what is he talking about? We don't have time to go through all 60, but he wants to raise taxes, and he said that the financial world is his number one opponent. This is not the kind of talk. It's not a time to raise taxes, and people can argue that point. But this is not a time to say the financial world is my number one opponent. It's a time to go in there and try and partner with these people and essentially kick them where the sun don't shine privately and get them to come along. With what Hollande was saying, you're looking at capital flight. If he's elected, you're looking at a flight of talent from this country, and people do not invest in countries, companies do not invest in countries that have high tax rates. End of story.
Could I come in there?
John Gaffney.
Yes, I mean, to develop Craig's point there a bit, I mean, it is actually, I think he does have a point in the sense that an awful lot of French people are sceptical and have been sceptical for a long time about the Socialist Party. There is a sense in which they do often promise and then don't deliver. There is a spirit for a desire for change and so on, and obviously a lot of people are going through some very difficult times, but when you say Craig's right. When you say you're going to drop the retirement age, you're going to you're going to create all these jobs in the public sector. An awful lot of French people don't believe you, and I think that matters in a presidential system where you have the potential for a strong centrist candidate. Now that raises an awful lot of problems, but it does, to a certain extent, it will be mediatized by the changing image of these different characters, but it does depend. It certainly looks as though François Hollande has has knocked the left of the left, into a cocked hat.
I want to pick up on that with Mathieu Douaret. A moment ago, Thomas was saying how within the party they're still a bit shell-shocked by what happened in 2002, where the socialists ran what was essentially a great second-round campaign, and they found themselves knocked out in the first round. Do you think that when he does things like promise to lower back the retirement age, it's basically just a first-round tactic, and, well, everybody knows he doesn't really mean it?
Because, of course, the purpose is to unite the left. But I would say that probably what you say is clearly reflective of a major obstacle a potential Hollande president would face if he was elected. But the reality in France is that the right has been in power for too long now to give credibility to the themes you developed. Liberalism, what we call liberalism, that is conservatism in France, is discredited by the fact that, in fact, it was never really implemented on the one hand, and on the other hand, that Sarkozy politics and Chirac politics failed policies and politics, because they made perhaps a mix of politics and policies that was too much of politics and too few policies that would leave a mark. And what is obvious is that Nicolas Sarkozy cannot rely on his achievements because the themes he had put forward in 2007 are clearly, in fact, the areas where he must obviously fail to deliver what he had promised before. So, of course, it is neither white or black. It is grey. But the reality is that people will clearly now give more attention to the black aspect, that is purchasing power, employment, and law and order.
All right, so the onus is still very much on the incumbent. When we come back, we're going to develop those themes and look more in detail at what they're promising. Stay with us.